All right, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our MSL Capita Clinic. And first of all, my name is Davis Turner. I'm the Senior Director of Strategic Programs, and I'm joined here with my colleague, Sam. Sam, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, nice to meet you. My name is Sam Ainzer, and I'm excited to tell you guys and learn with you on habit forming and player development and motivation.
Yeah. Awesome. So before we get started, just kind of talking about what Capita is. So MSL Capita is a kind of a brainchild of MindSpark Learning, and it's really focusing on coaches and building a stronger community through that. And I think we're trying to focus on the idea that athletes sometimes are more influenced by their, extracurricular activities and their sports and their coaches than sometimes their teachers or even parents. So we really want to create that widespread overarching theme of how do we create a well-rounded community, and Capita is focusing on that second half rather than the educator side. So we treat coaches the same as educators and parents the same as educators as well, and we just want to make sure we continue that cycle through athletic development as well, and just pushing that thinking even more so than we already have. So today, our focus is on the importance of habit forming and systems-based approach to player development, as Sam was alluding to. And first of all, we're going to kind of jump into a quick activity. So I'm going to have you guys, first and foremost, untie your shoe. I'll give everybody a quick second to do that. And, give me a quick thumbs up when you've untied your shoe and you're ready to go. All right. So with that, instead of just going and be like, oh, now this is uncomfortable and I have an untied shoe, I want you to think about retying your shoe, but in a different way. You can either use your left hand, your right hand, or your non-dominant hand, whatever it is. You can tie it in a new way of knots, new form. Do something that is different than the way you do your bunny ears or loop swoop and around the hoop. Change it up. Tell me how challenging that is. You can put in the chat. You can turn your mics on, however you want to share your information. Did it take people a little bit longer? Yeah. And that's the thing, right? We've created this repetitive habit and created this repetitive thing that we just do, right? It's out of efficiency. We've created these neural networks that have just been so fast and efficient over time that we don't even plan to do it. We just do it. We just get down. Sometimes we don't even look. We're focusing sometimes even on our own children's shoes or our own athletes' shoes or skates or whatever it is, cleats, and being able to tie them in the same way that we normally do. And so we've created these kind of systems and these habits that just make it efficient to save time. We don't think about it. We don't set a goal of it every morning or setting a goal of like, I'm going to tie my shoes this morning before I go out to work. It's just part of that daily routine and that habit that you kind of do. So when we think about creating habits, this is the whole point of today's lesson, is when we think about creating habits, it's something that we have to continually do. It's something that we want to do automatically. And it's not going to be challenging. It's not going to cause us more time. It's something that we're wanting to create a more efficient and effective system for. So when we were doing some research through Healthline, they said, hey, it takes about at least 18 days to create a new habit. So on average, it's about 66 days, but it takes at least 18 days. And a lot of times, this is why when you start, having these New Year's resolutions, they fail very quickly, right? First month out, you're joining, you're ready to go, but you don't see results because either you're going inconsistently, you're not, forming the best habits, not only just going to the gym or going, exercising or eating well, you're kind of inconsistent with it. So how do we create something that's going to be more consistent and more manageable? And that's kind of what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. So breaking down those New Year's resolutions or just different motivations throughout and succeeding beyond just those basic pieces. So Sam, I'll let you go for this one.
Yeah, I think Davis you have a really great point about that. And specifically when we're reaching coaches who we treat as educators at MindSpark, is one thing that I would ask you, what was a goal that you set or reached as a coach? And I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to think about that. All right, now let's go a little bit forward. Davis, can you take us to the next slide? One thing that I wanted to do that I learned when I was in the classroom was setting up a line of questioning that made sense. And that would mean that I wouldn't ask students questions that I knew that they couldn't answer. So let's try this again. What's a proud moment in your coaching career? And I see that I have someone that said, winning the state championship in lax. That's impressive, right? And when you think about this, you don't always think about the goals you achieve, but it is really easy to think about something that made you really proud and is tied to a feeling. So when I was in the classroom, I was setting up questions where students could cling to something immediately and then have something they could speak about. And that was a habit that I formed over hours and hours and hours of work in the classroom. So what we want to do, like Davis was saying, was leverage those habits and create systems where habits are basically things we do automatically, but they have to be reinforced. So let's talk about it. Let's advance that slide a little bit more. So that's what we were saying. It's the kind of moment when you think about something that you're proud of, it's the kind of moment that you love telling, that has a story behind it. You don't always think about the goals exactly, but you do remember that moment where you won state championship at lax. And we're going to give a moment for you guys to think about that. You can write it in the chat. You could write it down on a piece of paper. When you think about that proud moment, how did you achieve it? How did you get from winning the state championship to starting off and thinking about it? Or I should say the other way around. How did you get from starting and thinking about wanting to win the state championship to actually doing it? Yeah, I see people writing in the chat right now. That's a great point. Davis, can you advance us to the next part? Because I think that this is really where this all hits home. So if you've been thinking about your thinking, what you've noticed is that you don't get to the state championship by waking up one day and just winning it. You have to set not just goals of winning the state championship, but habits that lead to that goal. And some of those things are practicing every day. If you want a better jump shot and your goal is to hit 3 jump shots in a game, the way that battle is won is by practicing your jump shot every day. So we're going to come back and hit this point again of how habits contribute to your goals. And the way to reach your goals is through successful habit building and forming. Personally, the thing that made me realize this in my own life was what I would call the Mosaic Effect. And there was plenty of days sometimes where you wake up and you feel like, oh, today might not be the day, or today was hard, but tomorrow will be better. But what I realized is that each day is like a image that contributes to a mosaic. So if you want the total outcome to be like Michael Jordan's or to win that state championship, what you have to do is set the habits that contribute to that overall picture every single day. And you might have days where you do better than others. You might have days where you hit 10 jump shots, and you might have days where you hit 20 or you don't hit any. But the idea of building those habits that contribute to those that contributes to your motivation to that ultimate goal of this bigger picture is what we believe and research suggests is the key to to reaching your goal successfully.
And I think to your point, Sam, is those micro days, right? Or those like micro kind of habits that lead to the larger macro habits. And I think that's what these mosaic pictures almost illustrate is you have to look at each day individually and how it fits in the bigger picture, and not necessarily just saying, oh, you know what? Like you said, we're not just going to wake up and win the championship. We're going to work hard every single day, and every single day has a specific learning goal or learning target, and almost like be intentional about it, right? You're not going to have, a stack of championships in 6 days. You're not going to have all these different things. You're not going to win a championship every single day. You're going to practice to get there. And I think when we think about this mosaic effect, it's that systems approach of being, what is our system and what does that look like? And really how to identify those smaller pieces to get to the larger, bigger goal. And I think that's where goals and systems and habits differ. And so that's kind of what we're going to, get into is we need to find success, right? We need to find our way to win championships. And I almost challenge everybody to say like, all right, I find focusing on systems and habits more beneficial than focusing on goals, because I think goals are great as an overarching kind of theme. But when you break that down into those micro levels, like we did in a mosaic piece, is we need to look at, why we're doing that. Why are we setting the goals and what does it get you? So when we say goals reduce your current happiness, well, when you're working towards a goal, you're essentially saying, I'm not good enough yet, but I will be when I reach my goal. And so instead of thinking that way, let's think about this as almost like a level up plan. Every day I'm going to try to improve. Every day I'm going to get 1% better, and focusing on progress and focusing on the process of gaining that larger picture of that Michael Jordan or whatever that mosaic is for you. And so instead of just saying like, well, I didn't reach it there yet, I'm not good enough. That takes a lot out of you. It almost breaks down your morale and just saying like, well, maybe one day I'll get there. And it kind of almost alleviates some of that pressure that you put on yourself, because you're like, tomorrow. And it doesn't give you that systematic thinking of like, well, no, I've got to improve today. I've got to improve tomorrow. I've got to improve the next day. And you really bring it down and break it down into those smaller pieces. And so that kind of leads to that next point of like, goals are strangely at odds with long-term progress. And I think, when you're training for a half marathon, many people work hard for months, but as soon as that race is done, you stop training. Even though their goal was to finish the half marathon and now they've completed it, there's no goal is no longer there to motivate them. And so when all that hard work is focused on a particular goal, what's left to push you forward after you achieve it? So you have to think about what's going on with this idea of this yo-yo effect, right? Where people go back and forth on working on a goal or not working on one. This type of cycle makes it difficult to build upon your progress in the long term, because we're so focused on the end goal. We don't think about what happens after. We don't think about the progress and the process afterwards. So we need to release that need for that immediate result, or release the need for, I want this immediate feedback and immediate results right away. And so it's something that's not as tangible, but it's something that continues that motivation and that growth personally and intrinsically. And then the last piece is, goals suggest that you can control things that you have no control over. You can't predict the future. I know it's hard to believe, but we always try, and we always try to say, take control of the things that you can and leave the ones that you can't alone. So, but every time we set a goal, we try to do it. And we try to plan out where we'll be, when we'll make it there, and when we predict how quickly we can make progress, even though we have no idea what circumstances or situations will arise along the way. And I think, this goes with the intent of your day, right? Like, I'm going to set a goal to squat 350 pounds tomorrow. I'm not going to be squatting 350 pounds. I don't know. I haven't squatted in probably a year and a half, because it's, gyms are closed. But the thing is we have to think about, how do we plan for those goals? If I get injured, or if I get, pop a ligament in my knee, I'm not going to be able to squat by the end of the year, even though it almost pushes you and forces you say, I'm not going to achieve my goal because I was injured. So that then decreases that motivation to continue that push forward. And so sometimes we have no control over what's over the uncontrollables. And so being able to identify progress rather than the goal is almost more important in our long-term mental health and our state of well-being.
Absolutely, Davis. And to speak to what you said, this idea that goals will diminish your happiness and motivation over time because you are not reaching them, or you reach them and then you set a new goalpost to be happy about. But the things that are within our control are actually habits, because you can't control how many jump shots you make or if you win the state championship, but you can control showing up to the gym every day. And that's within your control. And then you set up a win-win situation where you can't lose, where it's not a matter of, Did I win the state championship? Yes or no, I'll be happy. Did I make 100 jump shots? Yes or no, I'll be happy. It's a matter of, did I show up and practice my shot from 9 to 10 today? If I did, then I did what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm contributing to that overall mosaic. And I'm building systems and I'm building habits. And that's the way I'm going to get 1% better.
Right. Yeah. It's just like, did I get better? Right. It's just showing that progress every day. And I think that's huge, right? Is just being able to identify those smaller aspects of it, and rather than just looking out long-term and thinking about what the long-term approach is, because sometimes that gets lost in translation because you don't know what habits need to be created in order to get to that goal. And so I think, yeah, Sam, you brought up a great point, that just showing up every day, right? And being there and putting in the effort to build those habits. And I think, like we said before, it takes at least 18 days to form a habit. So you can't just be like, well, I'm going to be, great, at 3 points or, my jump shot in a week. Just because you practice every day doesn't mean that's a habit, and doesn't mean that you've gotten that much better.
Yeah, it's kind of like making habits your goals.
Right. So when we think about goals and systems, and this is kind of where you're alluding to, Sam, is we say as a coach, right, your goal is to win a championship, right? That's the overarching theme. But the system that you're playing within is the team, that what your team does at practice each day. What do you need to focus on? What is an element? What are your efficiencies, deficiencies? How can you embrace this? What progress needs to be made at each and every practice? And how are you being intentional with those practices? So you're not just going to, even though you just show up to practice, that doesn't mean you're going to win a championship. That is your goal. But what are those things that will lead you to win to this championship? What is the mindset? What is the cognitive pieces that need to be trained? What are the teamwork and communication pieces that need to be trained, as well as the technical and strategies that need to be trained? So focusing on all those smaller systems are going to help your overall goal. And I think leading up to that is, there's so many different ways to approach this. And I give you so many different examples of being a writer, a runner, entrepreneur. It's applied across all fields. And I think that's the biggest piece, is it's not specific to just coaching and player development and even our own self-development. It's focused on what is the tangible pieces that you can do and take from this to your life, and allow your student athletes to take it to their lives and say, well, I know I want to be this in the future, or I want to do this, and I want to be a part of this. Okay, now how are you going to get there? What are the steps that you need to take? And breaking those things down to form different habits and more effective habits that are going to benefit them later to reach their goals. And so we have to have a little, fun with that. So Sam's going to lead you on a little activity here in a second, but I'll let you kind of take over this one.
Yeah. Both Davis and I have done a bunch of reading on this topic. It's something that really interests us. And what we want to do is give you kind of like a consolidated approach. Two books that I read on this that I think are immensely helpful are The Progress Principle and Willpower. And as you can imagine, The Progress Principle is basically a whole book about what motivates people and how to instill a sense of progress. And I would say this, the most interesting takeaway from that book is that more than money as an incentive, more than time off, the single most motivating aspect was in people's careers was the ability to make progress and to see that progress and to know that they're contributing to the progress of something larger than themselves. And the second book right there is Willpower. And that talks about how willpower works, and basically how motivation is set as it relates to habits and many other things. So the right type of goal you guys can see on the left is it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. And basically the purpose of that is to make the goal concrete, which means not something abstract like I'll be a better writer. It's something like I'll write 10 pages. It's easy to grasp, as mentioned before. It's clearly designed, and it's self-accountable. Just like showing up to the gym to shoot those shots is within your control, the same thing about becoming a better writer is. And simultaneously, the right type of habit has a larger purpose, right? It's connected to something. Our minds always want to make meaning of something. So it's not just something that, it's not like, hey, pluck these pieces of grass. If that's a habit of yours, it doesn't really make sense. You have to know why you're doing it. You have to know it's connected. Oh, if I cut my lawn and I cut these pieces of grass, that's going to increase my property value, and that's why I mow my lawn every week. And it allows you to see progress too. First, the grass was here, now it's here. It's at a set time. I do it every morning. It's tracked, and it has a reward. You get that feeling of cutting your lawn. This is crazy that I'm talking about cutting a lawn and I don't have one, but I feel like I'm commiserating. I know what it's going to be like to own a lawn one day, and I'm going to love it.
I love it. And I think the point being too is like the fact that you're kind of always giving yourself that self-feedback, right? You're creating those feedback loops to show that progress and to show that motivation. So creating those pieces of like, well, I'm doing this today, I'm doing this tomorrow, I'm doing this tomorrow, and knowing and tracking that progress and being able to identify what you've done to make yourself better is just showing you and giving you feedback every single day of what you've done, what you did, how are you getting better, and almost creating your own kind of data sheet from it. And so being able to track that is just a huge piece. And definitely, when you're relating it to cutting the grass and mowing the lawn, it is definitely a nuisance for sure. I'm not going to say that I really always enjoy it. It is definitely got some meditative states to it and some calming aspects, but at the same time, it's like you have to create the habit of doing it once a week. You have to maintain it. You have to maintain the grass. You have to add soil, and you have to add all these different nutrients. But that's just like what we do. I think it's a great analogy of, ourselves, right? We have to nurture these things. We have to make sure that we consistently do it. Otherwise, parts of that grass are going to die. Parts of ourselves are going to be, washed away or kind of be taken over if we don't make progress, or if we're not nourishing it, if we're not putting the right elements in. And so when we take these habits, or we, have a bad habit of not watering the grass for 3 weeks in the middle of a Colorado summer, your grass is going to be pretty dry and dead and crispy, right? So you want to make sure that you're continuing these habits and creating the positive things, because if you're not nourishing it with the right things, it's going to be bad. I mean, there's going to be, if you put battery acid on the grass or put oil in the grass, you're not feeding it or nourishing it. You're putting a negative thing into it, and it's going to kill something else and die off. So being able to understand and identify what's good for it, what's bad for it, and how to make it better, those are all part of the bigger picture. And I think those small, challenges and those things that we're talking about is those micro choices and those micro little daily habits that we have to create in order to think about things in a systems focused way, I should say.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about sports and coaching, this idea that like every time you take an action, a lot of times on the field, you get a piece of feedback. If you shoot a jump shot and it goes off to the left, you think about correcting it a little bit more. If you're trying to skate faster, you have a measurable amount of time that you can see, and you get those internal data points that you can get that feedback and then adjust your performance for it.
Absolutely. And now there's even now thinking about like the technology within sports, it's only going to help us understand and identify some of these feedback loops too. So I think being able to adapt and identify which data we want to capture is also huge. Random plug, I definitely had a session or a clinic not too long, I think last month, about data analytics and data synthesis. So feel free to look back on our toolkit and so on to check that out as well, about data and why it's important. But back to what we were talking about before with habits.
Right. Forget about the lawn stuff for now. All right. So let's do practice exercise right here. So my goal overall is that I want to book my first boxing match. I want to get in the ring. I want to punch some people. I want to maybe get punched a little bit, but not that much. And that's a good goal, but in order to understand it in a concrete way, in a way that's going to make me successful, in a way where I can mentally grasp it, I need to break it down. And I broke it down into tasks. For sure, I have to register with the boxing association. For sure, I have to find a new gym that's open. For sure, I have to find a fight date that you can see on the left, and I have to train. But training it's abstract. What does training mean? What does it look like? What time does it happen? How do I set myself up that I could set a good habit and continue to do it? So I'm going to open this up to you guys in the chat. What ideas do you have where I can make my training a habit based on what we've discussed so far? Okay, I'm starting to see some good things in the chat. I see things like footwork, right? But if I want to improve my footwork, what does that actually look like? So if I wanted to improve my footwork, I could do something specific. I could jump rope. Now, if I wanted to jump rope and work on my footwork, how would I turn that into habit? Well, maybe I could do that at a certain time. So I could say, every time I start training after work at 4 o'clock, I'll start by jumping rope. But how can I make that even more measurable? Maybe I could say I'll jump rope for 20 minutes from 4 to 4:20 every single day I train, Monday through Friday. Now I went from having a goal of training to building a habit. And that's totally within my control. The only thing stopping me is between me and that training is that rope, and I'm going to jump it. And now suddenly I don't have a goal that reduces my happiness, but I have a habit that I look forward to every day at 4 o'clock. Davis, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking too, just to say, sometimes we can't control the uncontrollable, right? Like thinking about if you show up to the gym 5 minutes late, do you only focus on jumping rope till 4:20? Or do you take that step and be like, oh, I lost 5 minutes late? Or do you just focus on the 20 minutes in that training session? So is it specifically to a time, or is it specifically to, the amount that you're doing?
That's a good question too, right? I could say something like, I would say jump rope is usually measured by time, but I could say something like, I'm going to do, 200 consecutive rope jumps without messing up. And that could take me 5 minutes, and that could take me 10 minutes, or whatever it is. And then that's another way I could track and measure my progress. Oh, I jump rope 200 times without messing up. And it took me 15 minutes the day before, and now it only takes me 10. So that's a good way to incorporate feedback into your habit setting, Davis.
Right. And I think it can be on an evolutionary scale too, right? Like you're saying, like maybe it's a 2-foot jump, maybe it's alternating feet down the line. Maybe it's, you do, what is it called? Double Dutch, where you spin it twice around, and it's pretty like speed jumping, and thinking about how that's training your feet and what you're doing and what the purpose is. Maybe it's split jumps and being able to identify different attributes that it's going to help you in your boxing match. So definitely you start off with a simple, easy goal, right? Like something that's, attainable. It's something that you can put metrics to and collect data on, but then you kind of raise the stakes. As soon as that's becoming a habit of just jumping rope, now how can I make that better? How can I improve that? How can I revolutionize that to enhance my skills even that much more or that much faster? So it is basics, you coming down to focus on that habit first, right? You want to know that you're going to jump rope for 20 minutes, and whatever that 20 minutes is, or whatever those 200 jumps look like, is up to you beyond, your basic skills. So I think that's where we start looking into, that skill-based thing. We create habits to improve, or to kind of really just identify and cue those habits and then start that routine. But then when we want to continue gaining those rewards and gaining that kind of cycle of progress, we have to change it up. We have to revolutionize some of those elements as well, even though they're still within that framework of that same habit.
Yeah, continually challenging yourself is so important, right? So if I know that I could do it 200 straight, I could either try for 300, or I could do split jumps like you were saying. And finding ways to challenge yourself is essential for growth.
Absolutely. And so that kind of leads us, to the next point is we look for that growth every single time, right? We don't want to get down on ourselves when we say and set ourselves with these goals, right? We oftentimes say we want to win a championship, we want to do this, but we often overlook the time, the dedication, and all the little elements that take to get there. And the habits, the practices, the hard work, the mental breakdowns, all those different elements that play into the bigger picture, we have to really understand why, right? So 1% increments and improvements add up surprisingly fast, and so do declines. So if you're not trying to improve every single day, you're going to get that much worse. So if you say, we put this on a scale, and I want to thank James Clear and his Atomic Habits book and everything that he's put out too. This is kind of the source for this, but the idea behind getting 1% better every day, you're going to be, if you start at 1, you're going to be like almost 38 times better at that one skill if you focus on one skill by the end of the year. So it's a significant improvement, and it's exponential. So everything is just layering and continuing to grow on top of each other. But that's also the same if you're focusing on some sort of negative habit. So let's say you started, picking up smoking, right? Your well-trained body, and you start a habit of smoking a cigarette each day. That's just reducing your lung capacity. That's reducing your endurance training. And that's reducing this. And it's a negative aspect. And you don't want to continue that cycle. You want to be able to break that cycle. But if you did, you're nothing like you were before. You're almost 100% decrease in that productivity from that initial 1% to now 0.03%. So it has a radical incline or decline depending on which habits that you're trying to form or break. And I think that's the biggest aspect of focusing on just improving 1% each day. 1% doesn't seem like a lot. It's something that's manageable, and it's something that you guys can focus on. And you don't know what 1% is until you start making these goals and what your habits look like for you. And I think it's very kind of personalized and individualized. So we can only tell you, try to get 1% better, but we don't know where your baseline is. We don't know what your student athletes' baselines are. So being able to elevate them and let them be more self-aware and giving them agency and autonomy within their own practice schedule, that's when you're going to see some real growth, because they know maybe they are deficient at, jump shots, or maybe they can't throw sidearm. Maybe they can't, whip it to first base from shortstop. How can you get them to understand what it takes to get that, either that motion or that element of the play down, or what they can do to improve that? And so each individual student athlete really needs that focus. And I think that's when we take our coaching and say, all right, let's break this down to your specific needs. I know you're efficient here. We don't need to continue practicing this system. We can, continue working on it and making sure that you're still up to date, but let's focus on this deficiency. And so we can turn this cycle around, so it's not continuing this bad habit or this bad technique, and really shift that focus from taking away from that larger growth. And so getting that whole athlete more focus. And so giving that individual athlete that individual attention that they really need.
And once you give them that attention and you have their mindset and allow them to focus on that 1% better, you could say, hey, you know what? You ran this 0.10 of seconds faster than you did last week. And that will instill higher motivation and more feedback and a desire to grow more as well.
Yeah, I mean, those rewards and that intrinsic motivation of saying like, oh, I made progress. That's almost enough to keep people pushing, keep people wanting more, because they want more progress. They want to run that 4.3. They want to be able to be the fastest or, the quickest out there. So definitely a huge motivator. So here's a quick clip from The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And I want to show you this clip because this is just kind of how habits work. And I really want you to identify where we've started creating habits. And he does a really good job breaking down his own habits in this initial video. So we'll watch this really quick clip and then we'll kind of discuss in a second.
Imagine for a moment that you have a habit that you really want to change. Let's say, for instance, you go up to the cafeteria every afternoon and you eat a chocolate chip cookie. This habit has caused you to gain a little bit of weight. In fact, this habit has caused you to gain exactly 8 pounds, and your wife has started making some pointed comments. And when I say you, what I really mean is me, because this is a habit that I had that I just couldn't kick. To understand why that habit was so powerful and what it would take to change it, I had to learn how habits work. Every habit functions the same way. At first, there's a cue, some type of trigger that makes the behavior unfold automatically. Studies tell us that a cue can be a location, a time of day, a certain emotional state, other people, or just a pattern of behaviors that consistently triggers a certain routine. To figure out the cue for my craving, I spent a few days tracking exactly when the urge to eat a cookie hit. And what I noticed pretty soon was something interesting. The cookie craving always hit about between 3 o'clock and 3:30 in the afternoon. That was my cue. It was a certain time of day. The next part in the habit loop is the routine, the behavior itself. And for me, that was pretty easy to figure out. Every day between 3 and 3:30, I'd get this craving for a cookie. I'd get up out of my chair. I'd walk over to the elevator. I'd take the elevator up to the 14th floor. I'd get out. I'd buy a cookie, and then I would eat it while talking to my colleagues in the cafeteria. The last part of the habit loop is the reward. And in some respects, the reward is the most important part because that's why habits exist, so that we can get the rewards that we want. But figuring out a reward is kind of tricky. To figure out what reward was driving my habit, I did a little bit of an experiment. One day when the cookie urge struck, instead of going up to the cafeteria, I went outside and I took a walk around the block. Then the next day, I went up to the cafeteria, but instead of buying a cookie, I got a candy bar and then ate it at my desk. And then the day after that, I went up to the cafeteria again, but I didn't buy anything. Instead, I just talked to friends for about 10 minutes. You get the idea. What I was trying to do was test different hypotheses to figure out what reward I was actually craving. And what I figured out pretty quickly was it had nothing to do with cookies. It had to do with socializing. Nowadays what happens is at about 3:30 in the afternoon, I absentmindedly stand up, I look around the office, I see a friend, I'll walk over and we'll gossip for 10 minutes and then I'll go back to my desk. The urge to go get a cookie has completely disappeared. The new behavior has become a habit, and I've lost about 12 pounds as a result. Studies have shown that if you can diagnose your habits, you can change them in whichever way you want. So what are the cues, routines, and rewards in your life? What habit do you want to change?
No, I love that video just because it simplifies things so well, right? It simplifies, the cue, the motivations, and why we do things, and really figuring out what is the real purpose, right? We made this analogy as Sam and I were discussing prior to today, like, we eat ice cream, a scoop of ice cream every night, right? It's delicious, it's meaningless, but at the same time, if you ate an ice cream every single night of the year, that's 365 scoops of ice cream. That's probably not the healthiest thing to be fit or to be healthy, and to understand like what benefits does it have on you as a person, right? It may momentarily, say, I feel better and it's, I'm less stressed because it kind of cues that like, oh, this is enjoyable. I'm going to do this every night. But at the same time, in the long run, is 365 scoops of ice cream really worth it for your health and well-being? Is it mentally there? Is it, something that we can break down? What are our real goals and what are our habits that we're trying to create or break in that sense?
You're right, Davis. It's that idea that like some people are like, it's just one scoop of ice cream. But when you think about a habit or a system over a long period of time, it compounds, right? In the same way, it's just one scoop of ice cream. You could use that same logic and say, it's just one push-up when I wake up in the morning. But that could turn into a lot more.
No, absolutely. And I think that's where we have to focus, right? Like our next steps are what habits that we're going to create that's just 1% better. Like maybe we start a push-up every week for 3 weeks, 1 push-up every morning, and then it's 2 push-ups, then it's 3 push-ups. It's those smaller increments that we do to continue that increase. And so as we kind of move on, we're going to focus on, our Habits Scorecard, right? So essentially what we're talking about, Sam and I, we're really discussing what we do and is it a positive or negative habit? And so we're going to ask you to do, kind of write out your day And this could be a full day. This could be, just the morning, or just a section that that you have a bad habit that you're going to or want to break, or a habit that you want to insert at some given spot. So at this point, I want you to take maybe 2 minutes to write down your morning habits, your morning routine. What do you do when you first wake up? And it might look different from my list. I put that up there just so you kind of have a baseline, right? I turn off my alarm, I check my phone, I go to the bathroom, I weigh myself, I take a shower, put on my contacts, brush my teeth, and so on. There's all these different elements that add up in our daily habits. This is my morning routine. I don't like veering from it because then it makes me feel, anxious. It makes me feel out of sorts. So finding this routine is almost comforting, and following this routine is almost comforting to me because I've done it for so long and I don't have to really think about it. And so that's the real, I guess, challenge is when we don't think about these things, why do we do them? And so finding that efficient system. So I'll give you about 2 minutes about 2 minutes to write down your morning routine, and then we'll kind of come back and I'll tell you what we're going to do with them next. So you got 2 minutes. Go ahead. All right. So with that, I want you to think about those habits. And once you have your full list, I want you to look at each of those behaviors. And if it's a good habit, right next to it, put a plus. If it's a bad habit, write a minus. And if it's kind of a neutral habit, write equal, right? Like an equal sign. So real quick, I'll give you about another minute to look at your list and go through your habits. So you can kind of see on the baseline here on my sample list of where the pluses and the neutrals and so on. So just so you get an idea, but take about a minute to put in your positive and negative habits. All right. So as you kind of wrap up there, I want you to look at those. I think when you think about positive, negative, and kind of like neutral habits, it's pretty subjective, right? It's really what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve and which habits you're trying to, keep and which ones you're trying to break. So when you think about your larger picture goal, what does that look like? So if you're waking up, eating breakfast, and you're having, peanut butter sandwich, eggs and bacon, sausage, that's great if you're trying to bulk up and add muscle mass, right? And add more protein to your diet. If you're trying to lose weight, maybe not the best way to lose weight, right? You want to avoid, all these different proteins and all these different saturated fats within the sausage or bacon, and really just understanding your goal and how subjective these can be. So when I say labeling a good habit or bad habit or positive or negative, it's kind of inaccurate, right? There's no good or bad habits. It's just effective habits or non-effective habits. So what are habits that are serving you for the better and which ones are serving you for the negative? So all habits serve you in some way, even the bad ones, which is why we repeat them. And so when we think about this, we want to create good habits that will have positive outcomes. And bad habits like smoking may reduce stress right now, but it's going to have a long-term negative outcome, either long-term negative behavior or health reasons. So being able to identify those and understanding the subjectiveness of that behavior. So one question I like to use to kind of identify these is, does this behavior help me become the person that I wish to be, right? If this habit casts a vote or against that desired identity. So habits reinforce your desired identity are usually good, and habits that conflict with that are usually bad. So being able to identify some of those elements and being able to identify what's going to help you in the long run or what's going to be against you in the long run, those are ways to identify that. So going along, I know you didn't really do a habit scorecard for your whole day, but I highly suggest you do, because each day is going to be different, but also you're going to have this kind of feedback loop that you've created for yourself. What are positive habits and what are negative habits? And you're trying to address those cues and understand what that kind of purpose is and where the situations where this arises. So almost tracking your entire day and putting a positive and negative on it makes it less objective than being like, well, I'm just going to sneak this, donut right before I head off to work because it's just a donut for the car ride. Like it may happen every day, it may not, but it's still that inconsistent behavior that you're trying to break. I have to feel like, now I've transferred my, bar that I used to have in the morning whether it be a protein bar or anything like that, I've changed that into, just chewing on a stick of gum, right? It's just something that I had to do to keep myself occupied in the car. It wasn't necessarily food related, or I wasn't really hungry. It was just to keep myself occupied. So I listen to a podcast or I listen to music and I chew some gum, and it's just occupying my mouth and, my time as it would with stuffing a donut in my face. So it's all kind of relative to what we want and what habits that we want to create for ourselves. So that process of behavior change really starts with awareness and being able to identify what that meaning is. And so we look at the next kind of piece, and I'm just going to kind of share this image with you on the bottom here, or both images you can kind of look and reflect on, but then I'm going to let Sam kind of take over. But those small, easy, tangible things, in identifying those, whether it be like shoving a donut in your face on the car ride or chewing a stick of gum, it's an easy transition, right? It's an easy something. You're still doing something, but it's less negative or less kind of harmful to my identity later on. So I'm not going to gain 50 pounds by eating a donut every morning. I'm going to, whatever calorie, maybe 5 calories in a stick of gum. I don't know what the actual number is, but it's a lot healthier than a donut. I can tell you that. So, and it freshens my breath. So win-win. So the idea is just either reinforcing a habit that you've already had or changing it and really eliminating something that's really negative and challenging it to make it better or more effective for you. So Sam, I'm going to leave it up to you for the next step.
Yeah, Davis, I think that's incredibly well said. I think that idea that we're coming back to of kind of like one cigarette is one cigarette, but what picture am I painting overall? What mosaic am I creating by doing that? And then if you realize that you have these habits and you engage in this exercise, like we just did with Davis, this idea of like, all you really need is a pen and a paper and say, what habits do I have? And then being able to identify them, is this the kind of picture that I want to paint every day? Do I want to be someone who wakes up every day and paint a picture of me eating a donut? Is that what I want my life to look like? Maybe. But if you're trying to change your health and habits, then maybe, like you said, Davis talked about a very effective strategy, which is replacing a habit with another one when you get that cue, right? He knows it. He gets in the car. He wants to occupy himself. Maybe he used to do a donut. Maybe now he's opting for donut flavored gum. A lot less calories there and a lot of the same benefits of donuts. And now all this talking about donuts makes me want to have one as well. But let's bring this back to coaching. Let's bring this back to Capita, because our coaches are our educators and they have an impact on our students in the same or a greater way than they're aware of. So when you think about your goals for a coach this season, I want you to think about them in a way of habits, systems, and the habits and systems that are going to paint the picture that you want, and ones that are achievable and have that feedback, and ones that you can build on. So we're going to take the last couple of minutes before we wrap up, and I want you guys to answer those questions that are there in the slide. What habits will you have to create and achieve the goal that you wrote down? And what systems do you have in place that you'll be able to use? If you know you're going to get in the car every day like Davis, what habit can you use right there? If you know that you have to get equipment out of the gym every morning, what habit are you going to build into that system that you already have in place? Take about 2 minutes right now.
So as Sam's kind of noted, and as we start wrapping up and thinking about our goals and our habits, I want you to think about how this helps and supports you as a coach. And I want you to think about what habits are necessary in order for your student athletes or your athletes to get to where they want to be. So not necessarily is it only going to be focused on yourself as a coach and your team goals, but you're also those individual goals as well. So breaking things down for not only yourself and your team, but everybody involved, right? That's going to play into the larger picture of the grand scheme of things as well. So those individual goals lead to those team goals, lead to the team success, and lead to your success as well as your overall arching goal of maybe winning a championship. So being able to understand all the little elements that it takes to get there and breaking down each practice with intent, breaking down each skill or technique with intent, and that communication with intent. So, sometimes we know that those conversations are hard to have with these athletes who are trying to improve, or maybe they're, not focused, or their habits are broken, or they're creating a bad habit. And we just have to help them identify it, right? If they want to continually improve, we have to have those hard conversations as well. And I think as coaches, that is our responsibility. That's how we have that influence. And that's how we start pushing back and making that meaningful impact on these student athletes, rather than just sitting back and be like, well, they're not listening, so be it. We got to make sure that we're doing the best things that we can do and creating those habits in ourselves to have the audacity and have the motivation to do so as well. So maybe it is taking a step out of your comfort zone to have that conversation as well with these student athletes that need that conversation to happen. So I'm going to leave you guys with this quote before we kind of start wrapping up, by Amancio Ortega, and he's the Zara CEO. And I was just telling Sam, last week when we were kind of building this out, is the story of Zara is amazing, and I highly suggest following into that. But the idea that this quote I really enjoyed was, the daily task is marked by self-improvement, right? Self-improvement is not necessarily the be-all, end-all type of thing, but it's always searching for the new opportunity, always searching for what's more, always being kind of, I wouldn't say incontent, but like not content with what's currently here, right? Always wanting to strive to be better. And I think understanding and being self-aware and identifying some of these deficiencies is what happens, and what's creating those ideas of how do we create those positive habits to get where we want to be. So if you haven't had a chance, I'd definitely check his kind of history out and the story behind Zara. I thought it was really interesting, and it's a kind of changed the fashion industry, and just his insight on the whole branding itself. But again, like, I really want to thank you guys for participating. This is a huge improvement on not only what we're doing as a whole at Capita, but for you and your student athletes as well, if you've taken the time. And for those of you that are watching the recording, thank you guys. Hopefully you guys took some time to do some of the work as well. And please feel free, jump on our next, upcoming free clinics, and we would love to see you. They are free. We'll have these almost every single month throughout the year of 2021 and beyond. So please just join us. Just sign up on our website, mindspark.org/clinics, and you should be seeing a lot of those new ones come up. So please join us for the next one, and take our quick survey, please. So as we kind of put the survey link in the chat, you guys will notice it's a quick survey for you guys, but also just letting us know what we did and how we can improve and continue bringing topics that are relevant to you. So not necessarily focusing on what we want to talk about, but what you guys need, and very much like the Zara atmosphere. And so we kind of taken a page out of his book and said, what you desire is what we're going to be doing. And you kind of are our content creators / our advisors in that piece. So please let us know what we can do better, how we can improve, what topics we need to cover to really focus on the future for you guys and your coaching careers. Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you all.